Welcome to That's the Word, wholesome tales for the whole family. I'm Father James Yamauchi. Today's story, You've Done Nothing Wrong. Charles excitedly ran with the puppy in his arms. Things were finally changing in his life for the good. Not long ago, Jane could only muster a greeting to Charles when they saw each other on the street. She really did not want anything to do with him. Charles was distraught that he had caused her so much pain, but Jane's husband reassured him. Don't commit the sin of hating yourself when you've done nothing wrong. Charles finally came to realize the best thing was to give Jane some space. They had not interacted at all for some time. However, Jane had recently extended an olive branch and invited him to call. That visit had gone well, but there was more needed to mend the strained relationship. Now, Charles knocked on Jane's door, puppy in hand. He had just found it on the street and knew it needed a home. He thought the dog might be the perfect companion for Jane. Jane came to the door, surprised to see Charles there. She had not expected to see him again so soon. She looked in Charles's arm and saw the puppy. Jane, I thought this puppy could give you some cheer, Charles stated as he placed the puppy in her arms. Charles was spot on. For the first time in years, he saw a huge smile light up Jane's face. She graciously received the dog, and soon the dog daily accompanied Jane on her regular visits to the sick and the dying. Jane named the dog Duke, which was Charles's own nickname. As the puppy grew, it was ever loyal, strong, and brave, accompanying Jane no matter the time or season. As time passed, Jane's bitterness toward Charles indeed healed. The long process took a lot of grace, something that initially seemed out of her reach. Jane knew better, especially knowing that God would never turn away from her, even if she returned with the same request. The healing seemed insurmountable, and Jane needed time and prayer and guidance to help her do the unthinkable. The words of her husband were constantly on her mind. For your own sake, you must forgive him. How could she forgive Charles? The memory was fresh in her mind. Jane's husband left his home one day with Charles to go on a hunting expedition. While en route, Charles' shotgun fired accidentally, wounding Jane's husband in the leg. For 9 agonizing days, every attempt was made to save the life of Jane's husband. But in the end, Jane became a widow with 4 children at the age of 28. The accident shattered Jane's happiness. Despite the deep faith that was instilled in Jane as a child, she grew extremely bitter. But Jane also found in this period of great sorrow and depression the need to open our heart to her longing for God and to seek the Lord through prayer and the deepening of her spiritual life. Thankfully, people like Charles were patient with Jane, and his gestures of goodwill, including the gift of a puppy, were not in vain. Jane found the grace and freedom to so completely forgive Charles Donlesey, the cousin of her late husband, that she was the godmother to his child. She was a truly heroic witness to the faith amidst the most intense setbacks and trials, which strengthened her for the later work of founding a religious congregation for widows and women seeking a path of religious life that was an alternative to the austerities of the traditional orders. The saintly widow of a baron and co-foundress of the Order of the Visitation, Saint Jane Frances de Chantal. And for this week, that's the word. So we were very excited to tell a story about Saint Jane Frances de Chantal, but it was going to look a lot different. So we want to take you behind the scenes in creating this episode.
Dun, dun, dun.
There is the famous story of Saint Jane Frances de Chantal with Saint Francis de Sales, who is a bishop and Saint Jane's spiritual director once she became a widow, and who helped her found the Order of the Visitation.
The story goes that they had known of each other before they met, but they first met at a dinner party where they were seated next to each other. Jane was decked out with her jewels. She was a wealthy lady. St. Francis de Sales asked her if she intended to remarry. She vehemently denied that. And he said, well, in that case, lower the flag.
So that is the story we wanted to share with you all. And in doing the research, it was fascinating. Jean-Pierre and I had never heard of the struggle that she had to forgive her husband's cousin. We both knew that her husband died in a hunting accident, but not this great struggle. And there was one source we found regarding Charles's gift to Jane of this puppy. And so telling this story and the larger story of how she came to forgive Charles over a long course of time, to the point that she willingly became, at Charles's invitation, the godmother to one of Charles's children, we thought that indeed was the story to tell.
The greatest thing about doing That's the Word is when we think we have a story, and when we research it, we find an even greater story.
I have always had a deep respect and devotion to St. Francis de Sales, and by extension then to St. Jane Frances de Chantal. I have been to their tombs in France, and hearing this story deepens my appreciation for St. Jane Frances de Chantal, to know that the saints went through some tremendous crosses in life. She struggled with forgiveness, and she was able by God's grace to come through. And how can you and I, whatever our cross seems to be in life, can persevere as St. Jane did by the help of God's grace?
And if you're going through some period of deep grief, or you're struggling with forgiveness, St. Jane may be a great intercessor. If you enjoy That's the Word, please share the word. You can find the story extras for this story, You've Done Nothing Wrong, at thunderrock.org, where you can see pictures of St. Francis de Sales, St. Jane Frances de Chantal, and a link to their letters. Thunderrock.org is also where you can sign up for our weekly newsletter, and where you can find our social links and our email if you have any feedback or story ideas.
Thanks for listening, and join us next Wednesday for another wholesome tale for the whole family.